kind delivery driver helps a grandma cross the street, stunned when 20 luxury cars line up for him. The rain wasn't just falling. It was a physical weight, pressing down on the bruised tin roof of Elias's 1998 sedan. Each drop that struck the windshield was a tiny hammer, chipping away at his last reserves of hope. The wipers fought a losing battle, smearing the gray city into a watercolor of despair. It was the third Thursday of the month, the day before rent was due, and the crumpled bills in his wallet felt thin and inadequate, like a prayer whispered into a hurricane. His shift had been a bust, a string of low-tip orders and traffic jams that gnawed away at his fuel and his spirit. Now, on his final delivery, the scent of cold pizza from the passenger seat mingled with the damp chill seeping through the car's rusted floorboards. He glanced at the photograph tucked into his dashboard vent, its corners soft and worn from years of anxious touches. His sister, Maya, smiled out at him, her eyes bright despite the sterile hospital background. That smile was the only thing keeping him going. The medicine she needed was a cruel joke, a life-saving liquid that cost more per ounce than gold. Every late delivery, every missed shift, was a step closer to a choice he couldn't bear to make. A low, grinding noise from the engine served as a constant reminder that this car, his only tool for survival, was dying too. The landlord's voice echoed in his head, a smug, final warning. Midnight tomorrow, Elias. Not a minute later, quiet desperation was the air he breathed, the cold that had settled deep in his bones and refused to leave. As he neared the drop-off address, a frantic symphony of car horns erupted ahead. Through the smeared glass, he saw the source, a small, elderly woman, stranded in the middle of a four-lane street. She was a frail silhouette against the angry glare of headlights, her thin coat soaked through, a flimsy umbrella turned inside out by the wind. Cars swerved around her, sending up arcs of filthy water that drenched her further. No one stopped. They just honked, their impatience a violent, metallic scream. She looked utterly lost, a tiny, forgotten island in a river of steel and indifference. Elias's GPS blared. You are 2 minutes from your destination, 2 minutes, an eternity in his world. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. He couldn't afford this. The customer was already texting, his messages growing more aggressive with each passing minute. His boss, Mr. Henderson, had a zero-tolerance policy for late deliveries. It was an immediate dock in pay, and a second offense meant termination. Helping this woman would mean stopping, getting out, and sacrificing precious time he didn't have. It would mean risking the very money he needed for Maya's medicine, for the roof over their heads. Every logical part of his brain screamed at him to keep going, to be one of the indifferent cars that just swerved and sped away. It was the smart thing to do. It was the only thing to do. But then he saw her face. In a brief flash between the swishing wipers, he saw the terror in her eyes. It wasn't the look of a confused old woman. It was the profound, soul-deep fear of someone who had been abandoned by the world. It was a look he knew well. He saw it in the mirror some mornings. He saw it in the eyes of other parents in the hospital waiting room. It was the look of someone clinging to a ledge by their fingertips. In that instant, the late delivery, the angry customer, and Mr. Henderson's threats all faded into a dull, meaningless hum. He saw his own mother in her stooped shoulders, his own grandmother in her trembling hands. He saw a human being who needed help, and the cost ceased to matter. With a decisive breath that felt like a final surrender, Elias flicked on his hazard lights, the rhythmic clicking a sudden, steady heartbeat in the chaotic storm. He pulled the car to the curb, the engine shuddering in protest, and plunged into the rain. The cold hit him like a physical blow, plastering his thin uniform to his skin in seconds. He didn't have a jacket. He ran across the wet asphalt, his worn sneakers slipping on the painted lines. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice nearly swallowed by the traffic. He reached her side and gently touched her arm. She flinched, her eyes wide with fear, before they focused on his face. He offered her the kind of smile he could manage. "Let me help you," he took her arm, his hand covering her small, bird-like one, and held it securely. He could feel the tremors running through her. Together, they became a single, stubborn unit against the tide. He planted his feet, glared at the oncoming traffic, and raised his free hand, a silent command to stop. A truck blared its horn, but it slowed, and then the car behind it, and soon a fragile peace settled over the intersection. He walked her slowly, carefully, shielding her from the wind with his own body. She leaned on him, and he was struck by how light she was, yet there was a core of steel in her grip. Her clothes, he now noticed, were simple but made of a dark, rich wool that seemed to drink the light. When they reached the safety of the sidewalk, she finally let go of his arm but kept her piercing, pale gray eyes fixed on his. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was not frail at all. It was low and clear, with an accent he couldn't quite place. It held an ancient authority. "Of course," he breathed, shivering. "Please be careful. You are late for something important," she stated. It wasn't a question. He just nodded, unable to speak the truth of his desperation. "It's okay." "No, it is not okay," she corrected him gently. "A world that makes a man choose between his duty and his kindness is not an okay world." "What is your name?" "Elias," he said, his teeth starting to chatter. "Elias," she repeated, tasting the name. "You have a good heart. It is a rare and valuable thing. Do not let them break it." Before he could respond, a sleek, black sedan pulled silently to the curb beside them. It had no markings, and its windows were so dark they looked like polished obsidian. A man in a perfectly tailored black suit emerged, his face impassive, and opened the rear door. He held a large black umbrella over the woman. She gave Elias one last, searching look, a look that seemed to see right through his wet clothes and into the very marrow of his anxieties. Then she turned, was helped into the car by the silent man, and vanished into the tinted darkness. The car pulled away as silently as it had arrived, leaving Elias alone on the sidewalk, soaked to the bone and disastrously, irrevocably late. Getting back to his car, the cold seemed to seep into his soul. The pizza was lukewarm. The customer was furious. By the time Elias returned to the dispatch center, Mr. Henderson was waiting for him, his arms crossed, his face a mask of pinched fury. "You're done, Elias," he said, not even bothering to lower his voice. "I got a 1-star review and a complaint about cold food and a soaking wet driver. I can't have that. This is a business, not a charity. Pack your things." There was no room for explanation, no appeal. Elias simply nodded, the fight gone out of him. He walked out into the rain without a job, without a final paycheck, without a sliver of hope. He drove home in a stupor, the grinding of the engine a mocking laugh. Taped to his apartment door was the notice he'd been dreading. The familiar blue ink of the warning had been replaced with a vicious red. Eviction notice. 24 hours. The words swam before his eyes. He stumbled inside the small, bare apartment and collapsed onto the lumpy sofa. He had failed. He had failed Maya. He had tried so hard to be good, to work hard, to do the right thing, and this was his reward, ruin. He sat in the dark for hours as the rain continued its relentless assault on the windows, each tap a reminder of his powerlessness. Later, he mechanically went through the motions of preparing for the inevitable, sorting through the few possessions he and Maya owned. His fingers brushed against a small, wooden box on a dusty shelf. Inside lay a little bird, carved from a dark, smooth wood, its wings outstretched. It was the only thing he had left of his grandfather, a man he'd never met. His mother used to tell him the story. His grandfather had been a doctor in a poor neighborhood, a man who believed healing was a right, not a commodity. He treated everyone, often for no more than a bag of vegetables or a mended shirt. One winter, he had saved the life of a very sick man, the husband of a proud immigrant woman who had nothing to offer but her word. She had given him the carved bird. "This is a promise," she had told him, her eyes fierce with honor. "My family does not forget. A debt of kindness will always be repaid." No matter how long it takes, Elias held the bird in his palm. It felt foolish, a relic from a fairy tale world that no longer existed. Kindness hadn't saved his grandfather from dying young and poor, and it certainly hadn't saved Elias. It felt like a curse, a legacy of naivete that had led him directly to this cold, empty room. He put the bird down, the weight of his failure pressing in on him from all sides. The next morning, the doorbell rang, a harsh, demanding buzz that jolted Elias from his bleak thoughts. He expected the sheriff. Instead, it was his landlord, Mr. Gable, his face set in a smug, predatory grin. He sidled into the apartment, his eyes cataloging the packing boxes with satisfaction. "So, the good little soldier is finally surrendering," Gable sneered. "Tough break, kid." Elias just stared at him, too exhausted to feel anger. "Look," Gable said, lowering his voice into a conspiratorial whisper. "I feel for you. I do. So I'm gonna offer you a way out. A friend of mine needs a driver. A one-time job. Tonight. A special delivery down to the docks. He pays cash. A lot of cash. Enough to solve all this." He gestured around the room. "No questions asked. You just drive, drop, and disappear." The implication was as clear as it was ugly. It was a lifeline, a dirty, crooked one, but a lifeline nonetheless. The money would mean rent. It would mean Maya's medicine. It would mean survival. Gable watched him, his eyes glittering. "This is how the world works, Elias. The good guys finish last. You gotta get your hands dirty to get ahead." For a terrifying second, Elias considered it. The sheer, desperate relief of saying yes was a powerful lure. But then his gaze fell on Maya's photograph on the mantelpiece. Her bright, innocent smile. He thought of his grandfather and the carved bird. What kind of life would he be buying for her with that kind of money? What kind of man would he become? He looked back at Gable, his spine straightening, his exhaustion replaced by a sudden, cold clarity. "No," he said. The word was quiet, but it was absolute. Gable stared, then laughed. A short, ugly bark. "Your funeral, kid. Don't say I didn't try to help you." He slammed the door on his way out, leaving Elias in a silence that felt like a tomb. He had made his choice. He had chosen integrity, and in doing so, he had chosen ruin. He spent the next hour packing the last of their things, his movements slow and mechanical. He was trying to figure out where they would go, which shelter might have 2 beds, when a low, deep rumble began to permeate the walls. It grew steadily louder, a sound unlike any traffic he'd ever heard. He went to the window and looked down at the street. His breath caught in his throat. Lined up along the entire length of his block, curb to curb, was a silent, unmoving fleet of at least 20 gleaming black luxury sedans. They were identical, their tinted windows reflecting the gray sky like chips of obsidian. The street, usually bustling and noisy, had fallen completely silent. Neighbors peeked from behind their curtains, their faces a mixture of fear and awe. From the lead car, the same impassive man in the black suit emerged. He moved with an unnerving calm, his eyes scanning the building before fixing on Elias's window. He walked to the front entrance of the building, and a moment later, a firm, polite knock echoed on Elias's apartment door. His heart hammered against his ribs. He thought of Gable, of the illegal job, and a wave of fear washed over him. Had he sent someone? He opened the door a crack. The man stood there, his expression unreadable. "Elias?" he asked. His voice was calm and professional. "My name is Julian. I am the head of security for the Volkov family. May I come in?" Elias numbly stepped aside. Julian entered, his gaze sweeping over the packing boxes with a flicker of understanding. "I am here on behalf of Mrs. Alara Volkov," he said, his tone softening slightly. "She was very concerned about you." He paused. "Our family has been looking for yours for a very long time. For over 50 years, he looked at Elias, whose face was a mask of confusion. "Your grandfather, Dr. Marcus Thorne. He saved the life of Mrs. Volkov's husband when they first came to this country with nothing. He refused any payment." Julian's eyes flickered to the carved wooden bird on the mantelpiece. "He accepted only a promise. The Volkov family does not forget its debts. What happened next was a dizzying, unbelievable cascade of events. Julian placed a thick leather portfolio on the table. He opened it, revealing a property deed. "Mrs. Volkov has purchased this building," he said simply. "It is yours now. The title has already been transferred to your name before Elias could process this." Another man in a dark suit entered, carrying a heavy silver briefcase. He placed it on the table and opened it. It was filled with neat stacks of $100 bills. "Your immediate financial concerns have been addressed," Julian continued, as if discussing the weather. "Furthermore, Dr. Alistair Finch, the country's leading pediatric pulmonologist, is waiting for your call to take over your sister's case. All her medical expenses, past, present, and future, will be covered." Elias stared, speechless, his mind unable to bridge the gap between his reality of 5 minutes ago and this one. He sank into a chair, his legs suddenly unable to support him. Just then, a commotion erupted from the hallway. Mr. Gable came storming in, his face purple with rage. "What is the meaning of this? Who are you people? This is my property. Get out." Julian didn't even turn around. He simply slid the deed across the table towards Gable. "I believe you are mistaken," he said, his voice dropping to an icy calm. "You are trespassing, Mr. Gable. I suggest you leave before I have you removed." Gable snatched the paper, his eyes widening in disbelief and fury as he read it. He looked from the deed to Elias and back again, his jaw working silently. From the doorway, another figure appeared. Mr. Henderson, Elias's former boss, drawn by the spectacle of the cars. He saw Elias at the center of it all, surrounded by men in expensive suits, and his face went pale. "Elias, my boy," he sputtered, forcing a greasy smile. "I was just coming to apologize. A terrible mistake letting you go. Your job is waiting for you, of course, with a raise." Elias just looked at him, a deep, weary sadness in his eyes, and slowly shook his head. The crowd of men parted as a final figure appeared in the doorway. It was Ilara Volkov. She was no longer the frail, rain-soaked woman from the street. She was dressed in an elegant gray coat, her white hair coiled perfectly, her posture radiating a quiet, unshakable power. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. She walked directly to Elias, ignoring everyone else. She looked at the humiliated Gable and the groveling Henderson with a glance of utter dismissal, then turned her warm, intelligent eyes to Elias. She placed a gentle hand on his cheek. "My husband told me your grandfather was the finest man he ever knew," she said, her voice clear and strong for all to hear. "He said his integrity was a light in the darkness. I see he passed that light on to you." She looked out at the gawking neighbors in the hall. "This man, Elias, when he had nothing, stopped to help a stranger. He sacrificed what little he had for an act of simple human decency. That is a kind of wealth that people like these," she gestured to Gable and Henderson, "will never understand." She turned back to Elias, her expression softening. "A debt of kindness must be repaid. You are part of our family now, Elias. You and Maya will never want for anything again." 6 months later, the sun streamed through the large, new windows of Elias's apartment. The building, once gray and grim, had been completely renovated, its cheerful facade a beacon on the street. He'd kept the rent low for the existing tenants and had even converted the ground floor into a free community health clinic named after his grandfather. Maya, her laughter echoing through the rooms, was chasing a sunbeam across the polished hardwood floor. She was healthy, vibrant, and free from the shadow of illness that had haunted their lives. Elias no longer drove for a living. He now managed the Volkov Foundation's new charitable branch, using his experiences to help others teetering on the same edge from which he had been rescued. Every Thursday, he had dinner at the Volkov estate, a sprawling mansion that had initially intimidated him, but now felt like a second home. He was no longer just Elias, the struggling delivery driver. He was a son, a brother, a friend. He had found his family. He often held the small, carved bird in his hand, its wood warmed by his touch. It was a reminder that the world could be a cold, unforgiving place, but that a single act of kindness, no matter how small or costly, could send ripples across generations, returning as a tidal wave of grace when it was needed most.